This is Independent American Forum. This channel is not affiliated with any political party, special interest group, or political action committee. My name is Steve. I am an independent, that is, an unaffiliated voter. I am not running for any public office. I am making this video solely because I love our democratic republic and the United States Constitution. Further, I believe they are both under attack right now. Indeed, I believe the U.S. Constitution is today hanging, as it were, by a single thread. So you are invited to join a discussion about how we can preserve our Constitution, our rights, and our nation. Today I am going to talk about the threat to democracy from corrupt political machines. We sometimes refer to machine politics or simply to dirty party politics or partisan politics. There is a long and inglorious history of political machines in the United States. Self-serving parties and special interests were things that our first president, George Washington, specifically warned the American people about in his farewell address in 1796. Machine politics have been operating in this country in virtually every region of the country and in virtually every population group in the country for a very long time. Sometimes it has dominated the politics of major cities. It was President Andrew Jackson who said, he kind of normalized political graft, payola, and bossism by saying, "To the victors belong the spoils." A saying that's still used to normalize graft and payola. During the mass immigrations to the United States in the 1800s, there were a number of them from Europe. It was among the powerless and the disenfranchised that political machines just took off and flourished. The Irish, the Italian, European Jewish immigrants, and other immigrant groups were supported by, but also preyed upon by these political machines. And they were very common in big cities, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Chicago. And some of these were just famous, infamous. Sometimes sociologists and historians talk about urban political machines. Well, that implies that they were all in big cities, and that's not true. Sometimes they were. But they also have existed in suburban areas and out in rural areas. Any place where people felt like they were disenfranchised or didn't have power, any place where politicians could come in and do a few favors and then expect payback and patronage from those people. Most of the party machines in big cities have been dominated by the Democratic political party. But the Republican parties have had a few as well in cities as well as in suburbs and rural areas. You have probably heard of the notorious Tammany Hall machine that was run by boss William Tweed. He dominated New York politics for much of the 1800s. He collected millions in bribes and payoffs, as well as bilking the city of New York and the state of New York out of additional millions. If you're not familiar with this sad tale, I recommend you go look it up on the internet. If you are a student of American history, you may be aware of other corrupt political machines. For instance, you may be aware of the huge Louisiana political machine that was headed for many years by Louisiana Senator Huey Long. Or you may be aware that Joseph Kennedy, the father of our 35th president, was one of the bosses of the Boston Democratic machine. You may be also aware that he personally participated in bootlegging and bank fraud. Or you may be familiar with the famous and long-running Cook County Democratic machine in Chicago. It was run for many years by Mayor Richard Daley, but there were other people before and after him. And there are undoubtedly hundreds, perhaps thousands, of other machines that have operated at one time or another in the United States. I once attended a journalism conference at the University of Missouri, and the presenters showed a film clip of ex-President Harry Truman appearing at a conference there, or a meeting, or something, and while he was there, a very disrespectful student asked the ex-president what he thought about being called the Pendergast office boy. This refers to the fact that Harry Truman was discovered shortly after he returned from a distinguished career as an artillery officer in World War I. And he was working as a lowly court clerk in Missouri. So it was Tom Pendergast, the boss of the Kansas City machine, Democratic machine, who had recruited Harry Truman to join the Democratic machine. And later on, it was Tom Pendergast who nominated Harry Truman to run for United States Senate. As I remember, what Harry Truman, President Truman, said was, "Listen, Sonny, Tom Pendergast was a great man and a great American, and there never was a more loyal American." Well, Tom Pendergast may very well have been a loyal American, but he was also corrupt, and at the time that the question was asked, he was a convicted felon serving time in a federal penitentiary for income tax evasion. Now, I have no information or evidence that Harry Truman ever descended to some of the more corrupt and more common practices of machine politics. But he never denied either that his career had been the result of the Democratic political machine in Kansas City. Now, let's talk about some of the better known characteristics, traits of political machines. Number one, they take bribes. Number two, they are usually run by a boss, an authoritarian ruler, or a group of authoritarian oligarchs. Number three, they appoint relatives and cronies to public office, most of whom are significantly unqualified, rather than seeking well-qualified candidates and honest candidates. Number four, they appoint corrupt judges to the bench in a deliberate attempt to undermine the integrity of the courts. Number five, they depend on the corrupt judges that they've gotten appointed, as well as corrupt prosecutors and corrupt police officers to look the other way when their friends and associates commit crime, but they also depend upon them to crack down on the criminal activities of their opponents. Kind of a dual standard there. Number 6, they steal elections. As a matter of fact, they're pretty good at it sometimes. For example, newly elected President John Kennedy was asked about why his margin of victory in the state of Illinois was so small. And he kind of joked and brushed it off. He said, well, my father couldn't afford a landslide. Well, really, that's kind of a tacit admission that there was a well-known propensity of the Cook County Democratic machine to steal votes and rig elections. Pack ballot boxes, or just steal the ones from your opponents. By the way, it was reported at about that same time by at least 2 national news magazines that the reason that the Republicans had not contested that election, their candidate at that time was Richard Nixon, who was defeated but later on elected president. They said that the reason that the Republicans had not contested the election is that the well-organized Republican political machine in downstate Illinois had been very busy packing ballot boxes and stealing votes on their own. So it was kind of a question of who had the most efficient at corrupt political machine. 7, political machines interrupt democracy in many other ways. For example, in the 2016 election and the 2018 election, Republican office holders took thousands of names in Florida and North Carolina and simply took them off the list of registered voters. And Republican office holders in North and South Dakota kept Native American citizens from voting because they did not have a street address. That sounds like dirty politics to me. And lastly, they often violate the civil rights of their opponents. I guess one more that I could add is they hide their income so that they don't have to pay taxes. Now, I will leave it up to you to go through that list and count up how many of those things you think are happening right now in the Trump administration. Now, I need to make some personal disclosures. I am an independent voter. I do not belong to any political party, and I have never voted a straight party ticket in my life. And I'm not running for public office. I have been voting in national elections since 1968. That's a long time. I have voted for Republican candidates 11 times. I have voted for a Democratic candidate exactly once. But I've also voted for independent and third-party candidates. That being said, I want to freely disclose to my viewers that I am anti-Trump. I'm also anti-Hillary Clinton. In the 2016 election, I didn't think that the candidate from either major party was remotely acceptable, and so I didn't vote for either one of them. I voted for somebody else. Also, over the years, I have favored, supported, and advocated the impeachment and removal from office of 3 American presidents: Richard Nixon, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump. Now, you may think that it's inconsistent that I have supported the impeachment of 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat, but I assure you there is a consistency here. The consistent thread that runs through this is, I hate corruption. I hate lies. And I assure you that the character of the office holder is significantly more important than party affiliation. Additionally, I submit to you that when people value party loyalty or regional loyalty or state loyalty over their identity as Americans, this is the very sentiment that fuels the creation of corrupt political machines. This is a threat to our nation that President George Washington specifically warned us about, that was going to happen. Now that I've disclosed a bit of my background and a little about my personal leanings, I want to emphasize that I believe that although Trump richly deserves to be fired like an apprentice on a really bad reality TV show, getting rid of him will not save America, and it will not solve our problem. One reason it will not solve our problem is that both major political parties are infected with malignant partisanship. If we simply replace Trump without reforming American politics, what will prevent the next Democratic president from appointing his own gaggle of sycophantic cronies and corrupt office seekers? The second reason this will not solve the problem is that we, the American people, have allowed special interest groups and political action committees to overwhelm our political process. This has been particularly true since the Supreme Court decision in the Citizens United case. This allows PACs, political action committees, and special interest groups to contribute unlimited funds to candidates without disclosing where the original contributions, the original money came from. I think this is a recipe for corruption, a recipe for disaster. I urge my fellow Americans to be Americans first, and Democrats or Republicans second, hopefully a very distant second. I'm not interested in the Make America Great Again slogan. I think it's just a slogan. I want to suggest that we need to make America America again. And we do that by insisting on honest candidates and insisting on constitutional processes. Thank you. And may God bless America and preserve it.